Ready to
And
go.
we are back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. And today we're talking about Star Trek The Next Generation's episode 20 of season 4 called Qpid. And I'm joined by this shadowy figure, my good friend, Jaymie.
Also
Hello.
known as Starfleet Man.
Yes, but also now you have a new nickname, which is Sir Guy.
Sir Guy, this is true. I have to admit, even I thought of that while watching the episode.
Except I was annoyed because the whole time I was like, it should be Sir Guy, not Sir Guy.
I knew we were going to have this discussion. So for anyone listening, my middle name is Guy, but I'm French Canadian, so it is actually technically pronounced Guy. And we'll get into the character later, but just so
Oh, Guy Mativier, yes. I don't know.
Guy
It's a little
Metivier.
that might be a little too. I don't know. I mean, he's got a career, right? I think it's
Yeah, this is all
not a bad.
inside baseball for anyone who's listening right now.
Yes.
Uh,
I
what
like
an
that.
episode!
Yes. It's one of my favorites, and I really enjoyed rewatching it. I made a ton of notes. I'll show them to you here. I get a quick preview of what my notes look like.
Oh, can I
All
show
right,
my notes? Oh,
yeah, you can show.
wow! What
These
is
are my
that?
note. That's my mind note.
What? I didn't even know there's a software that looked like that.
That's how I
That's
take all.
crazy.
I do all my thoughts like that. My notes. So
Let's see. How do I show my screen? Screen share.
screen share. Yep, yep. Very
All
good.
right, here I go. All right, so can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
So do you see these notes? Hold on, let me blow this up. Look
All right,
at these notes. It was an excited episode. There's a lot of all caps. It just keeps going.
I
Exclamation
like that
mark.
you and I basically did the same thing, which is a testament to the writing, I think, of this episode. Is we both wrote quotes like to remind us of scenes
Oh yeah.
because
Well,
it was such a quote heavy, like a quote laden episode.
right. And for any diehard fans watching, I do apologize for misspelling pretty much everyone's names in my notes. Yeah, there were a lot of quotables in this episode, especially with Worf. We'll get into that later, but
Do you want to go ahead and give the episode summary? Would you like that honor, or shall I?
sure, yeah.
Awesome.
So Qpid, fitfully is about is it like a romantic episode? I said that weird. It's a romantic episode. So Jean-Luc Picard is hanging out on the ship, preparing a speech for the Archaeological Council for some planet Tagus 3.
Vegas 3, that's right. Very
All
good.
right, great. Were you about to say Targus?
Yeah, I was, but it
All
is
right.
I looked at my notes.
Shout out to Targus, the
I
sponsor for
get
today's
get
episode.
off my.
Yeah. So, he's preparing this speech, and he's like nervous, and he can't go to sleep. And I don't know. Counselor Troy comes in and is like, "Yo, go to sleep," and he's like, "Okay, fine." And then he goes to his quarters, and he's suddenly visited by a lady by the name of Vash,
That's right.
Counselor Vash, or
No,
Vash.
just Vash. Just Vash.
Just Vash?
That's it. That's it. That's her
She
whole
doesn't
name.
like have a title.
No, well, she's an archaeologist. She's a space
Okay.
archaeologist.
All right. So
Wait,
Vash.
you're just meeting. You didn't see her. You haven't seen the episode with her previous her introduction.
No, was it sexy?
Yeah, it is. I'll have to tell you about it. Go on.
Damn.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. This is the blind test.
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So Vash comes in and he's like, "How did you get in here?" And she's like, "I came in through the window." And it's really hot. And they kiss. And he's like holding this weird object. And she's like, "Put that thing the fuck down." She literally throws it down. You hear the object, like you can see her hand it to like a PA right off camera. And you hear the Foley just go boom. And then she's like, they just full on start making out.
It was a really good that was a really good it
Yeah,
was a very natural kiss, you're right.
yeah, it was. I mean, Jean-Luc Picard definitely the sexiest. Like just like you can tell he's banging everything he fucking like. Anyway, whatever. You know he's like a sexy man.
I can assure you he actually does from what the show shows us, there's not very many lovers for Jean-Luc.
Well, I mean, I think the show implies otherwise. Yeah, so they're
The
like
episode
making
would.
out. Credits roll. When we come back, they're having breakfast, and it's like, whoa, man! Like like you can tell, like they both rattled each other's cages. Like they're in great moods, but they're like too tired to talk. And then Beverly Crusher just walks in, and it's real awkward. I wasn't sure actually here. I was like, wait, does Jean-Luc Picard like have a thing with Dr. Beverly Crusher? Is that why it's awkward? Right. So he's like,
oh, you're totally right.
and everyone picks up on it. Jean-Luc is like at the most low status you'll ever see him be in that scene. He's like freaking out. He doesn't know what to say. And Dr. Beverly Crusher and Vash actually get along great. And they're just like, yeah. Vash is like, why don't you show me around the ship? And she's like, Beverly Crusher's like, yeah, man, I would love that. So let's go. And meanwhile, Jean-Luc Picard's like dying. So they go around the ship and they immediately head to the space bar where everyone's just hanging out, which confused me because they were having breakfast like a second ago. And I was like, holy shit, everyone on this ship is day drinking. Like that's how bad the working conditions are.
In just the previous episode of Starfleet Boy of this show, we explained how synthahol works, and it's actually really cool. And I'll tell you more about that also.
All right.
So they're all drinking something called synthahol, and when they need to work, they just snap right out of their drunken states and are able to function normally. Like it doesn't make you actual drunk.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So everyone's there. Commander Riker is like immediately just like trying to put the moves on Vash, and she knows what's up, and he picks up on that, and he's like, "How do you know?" And she's like, "Well, Jean-Luc told me." And anyway, everyone starts picking up like, "Oh, the captain's got this secret lover that he met on his vacation to Ryza last year," and well, we didn't know that, and so. Everyone's kind of like, oh, what's going on here? And she shows up on deck. I think Commander Riker takes her up to like
to the bridge.
To the bridge. That's right. Yeah. And Jean-Luc Picard shows up and is just like, oh damn, this is awkward. And Worf is like, Worf is just kind of hanging out, like being snarky. He's like, oh, what's this?
Oh, Worf was not happy. Yeah, with the
yeah. He was not having it, but then he was kind of like, yeah, whatever, she's cute or something. So he lets her go, and it's a little awkward. That Jean-Luc Picard and Vash exchange some words, some polite words, and they say like, yeah, I look forward to seeing you later at the archaeological symposium, which was like such a blasé plot device for this episode. Like, yeah, what are viewers going to be able to hang on to? Ooh, an archaeological symposium. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe there is something to your theory about Picard's virility, because he does go to a lot of these symposiums.
Right. He's like yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, go on. Sorry.
He just sleeps around at all the most boring events in the universe.
Oh, good.
He's got a type. Yeah, so he goes to his little private I believe it's a radio room just off the bridge, and lo and behold, Q is just hanging out there being like, hey, you saved my life last time. I don't like owing you things, so I'm here to do you a favor so we can like be clean, and I won't owe you anything that way.
It's a nice thing for him to see.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. This is the first time I've seen you kind of be like that. And he's funny, and they have like a weird, witty exchange. And basically, the captain's like, "Nah, I'm good. The best thing you could do is get the hell off my ship, and we're good. Like we're fine." And Q's basically like, "Nah." So then we come back from commercial, and the captain and Vash are like hanging out again. He comes to see her, and they get into a bit of a quarrel. We find out that Vash was planning on going to a ruin on Tegas 3 that she was not allowed to go to. That no outsiders are allowed to visit. And this really upsets the captain. He basically says, she lies too much. She could get herself into a lot of trouble. Blah, blah, blah. She shouldn't be doing that. Why are you doing that? She profits from this. She says, which was really interesting. He's like, yeah, well, you steal artifacts and sell them for a profit. And she's like, well, that's my job. And I was like, that's really interesting. Commentary on archaeology, because I've never thought of it that way. Like, oh yeah, they're all profiteers. Especially when you get into
it's different when it belongs when it belongs in a museum, to quote another famous renegade archaeologist.
Well, actually, yeah. I don't know. It is interesting. I mean, yeah, especially when you look at like the colonial history of archaeology. And I think that's kind of what they were touching on with the Starfleet. So that was really cool. But it was like very minor. And then basically the captain just storms out, and then the weirdest visual effects shot ever happens, and it's just Q, like I don't know what you call it. He like flashes into the room. But you only see like his shoulders and head hanging upside down from the ceiling.
He comes through the bulkhead. He's right. Like, it shows how omnipotent he is.
Yeah, so he just comes in, but he's like a peeping Tom up in the ceiling, and it's the 80s, so they like cut out a photo and like taped it up to the ceiling, and it looks so genuinely horrifying just because of the sheer like real, like it does not glorify being a peeping Tom at all. It's just
think of that Bette Midler song From a Distant, but replace God with Q. So Q is watching us from a distance.
Right, except it looks horrible. And of course he's just got like that grin. He's got a smarmy grin. And he's like, oh, I know. So anyway, things keep going. Q comes back to visit the captain. And he's like, oh, I know about your little love. And of course, the captain and Vash have been quibbling this whole episode about how the crew doesn't know about Vash and the captain, and that's kind of weird. And the captain thinks, well, I can't show my vulnerability or my feelings to the crew. Like, that's my responsibility as a captain. And she basically accuses him of making that up. And which is probably true, but you can also understand his point. So Q shows up and is like, I'm gonna tell everyone, I'm gonna show you that this is your weakness, and I'm gonna expose you to your crew. And the captain, of course, is like, yo, no, don't do that, just get the hell out of here. And he fill in the blank here.
Q can't resist. He's just like, okay, well, be warned. He said something like, so you won't allow me to interfere with your downfall? And he's like, no, just get away from me. And then he's like, well, be warned that as you wish, Captain. And so he creates this whole scenario.
Right. Yeah. So basically, after commercial break, we cut to the archaeological symposium, and there are like 10 people there. It's like tiny. I have no idea why you would lose sleep over this. It's ridiculous. Anyway, the captain's wearing a nice long tunic. He walks up to the podium, starts confidently giving his speech, and of course, the rest of the crew are sitting at the back of the room. And then in a very comical moment, like all of them preceded by the proprietary Q flash, like hats and different props from like old-timey England start to appear on all these characters, and they start to look like characters out of something medieval. And then you're like, what's going on? And the same thing happens to Picard, and he finally realizes it, and then everything just flashes, and suddenly they're in Nottingham. England, and the captain is Robin Hood, and he looks so sexy.
He does.
Unbelievable.
It's true.
And he's got the mustache and the little chin beard, like the soul patch or whatever,
I
whatever
know
it
that
is.
he had to. It looked real too. I think he grew that for the.
Right. It looked like Patrick Stewart was not gonna have anyone tape some facial hair onto him, so he just grew it out for real.
Maybe it
And
is actually
everyone's in
makeup. I don't
tights.
know.
Yeah, we'll look that one up. LaForge gets a loot, which was great. We'll get into that later. Anyway, basically, they show up and they realize slowly that they're in a simulation of Robin Hood. There he is. My goodness, what a beauty! For anyone who's just listening, we're just looking at a photo of Patrick
Of
Stewart. Right?
Patrick
Yeah,
Stewart. Yep.
it
As Robin Hood, as Picard, as Robin Hood.
it actually for me, because at the start of the episode, I was just like, the one thing with me in this show is that I never understood the sex appeal of Patrick Stewart, because I'm always like, he just looks so old all the time, right? Even though I
Wow.
know he wasn't that old.
Right.
But then, oh, there you go. So when I saw him as Robin Hood, I was like, oh shit, I see it. Like, I would definitely take
He's
this
a
dude
very
on a
fit.
date.
He's very fit. Also, like I think
Super
that
fit.
it's very evident that he fills those tights.
Yeah, he
in a
looks
very
great.
fit fashion.
Yeah. I actually had to like freeze frame at one point and be like, damn, look at him in those tights. That's unbelievable.
He's so fit that we got distracted from our summary.
Yeah. Anyway, so to make a long story short, Captain Picard, Captain Picard is Robin Hood, and Vash has been turned into the Maid Marian. Is that right?
That's right.
That's right. So, and we have the king, Sir Guy, who either wants to marry her or execute her, which was saying something about the treatment of women in pretty much all romantic scenarios. And
Wow.
yeah, so basically, Picard realizes this and tries to get over to the castle in Nottingham to save her. This whole plot unfolds where he infiltrates the room where she's being kept, and Vash kind of tricks the King of Nottingham into making her believe that she'll marry him, so as to cancel the execution. But
Very
then
clever. She thwarts Q's designs.
right, exactly. Yeah, so and so first she thwarts Sir Guy, and then
Right.
Captain Picard shows up, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing? You showed up alone? Where's your whole team? What are they doing?" Which was a great question, because you were like, "What are they all doing back there in that forest?" And she's like, "Get the hell out of here!" But Sir Guy walks in with his guards while that's going on, and he's like, "Oh shit! Now you're both gonna get executed." And all the while, like Q is like periodically showing up and just like being impressed with Vash. He's like, "Damn, you're good, man. Like, whoa." And she's like, "Yeah, I know who you are, Q. I heard about you." And he's like, "I'm gonna get you. You watch." So there they are. Oh man, there's damn. Cast just looked so good in those period costumes.
I don't think those are seen as accurate anymore.
Probably not. But I mean, I actually read in the notes about this episode that the movie Robin Hood, King of Thieves had just come out.
I wrote a note about the music. Dennis McCarthy, who's the composer, in the scene when we're first arrive in Sherwood Forest. I swear there's a quote to the I think it's James Horner music from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but I can't be 100% certain. But it sounds so much like the Prince of Thieves theme.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like something they would do.
Yeah.
Just like as a tribute.
They
So
might have. I think they might have also been both Paramount properties, so it was probably all good.
yeah, most likely. I mean it's Hollywood. Everyone's owned by the same guy.
Who's
Yes,
that guy? I'd like to know him.
Mr. Hollywood, man. You should check him
Oh
out.
man.
Well, now it's
I
Yeah.
thought it was someone else, like maybe you. No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding. Go
yeah.
on.
Well, I am a shadowy figure. I mean, that's why I can't show myself on this webcast. I'm actually recording this in my, executive office in Burbank, California.
I'm in my under my Starfleet uniform. I'm still in my jammies.
Oh, yeah, cool. No, I'm definitely actually in my sweatpants in a cold apartment somewhere in
Aw.
Canada. It's great. So I guess to wrap up the summary, basically, um, Picard and Vash are brought out to be executed, and the executioner looks hilarious. We'll get into that too. Um, uh, and the rest of the crew just magically show up in disguise as some folk who worked for the king, and they intercept the whole thing. They basically just smash swords until everyone is dead. Picard straight up kills Sir Guy, which was badass. There was just like blood on the sword, and right before he killed him, he was like, "I'm from the fucking future. Goodbye."
There he goes. He goes. I am the best swordsman in Nottingham, and he's like, I have a secret to tell you, or something like that. I have something to tell you. So, guy, he's like, what's that? And he's like, I'm not from Nottingham.
It's yeah, exactly. But
I don't know.
I
That was
remember
really
it
good.
as I'm from the future. Ah, um,
That would have been cool.
yeah, that would've been cool. I actually thought he was gonna like shoot him with a laser at that point.
Oh
I was
my
like,
god.
just like blow everyone's minds. Yeah, so then everyone's saved and it's cool, and they get everyone gets zapped back up to the USS Enterprise except Vash. And Picard's like, yo, where'd she go? Everyone more or less knows about their thing now. And but he's still embarrassed about it. And they get zipped back up to the archaeological symposium. Like they just get taken right back. But everyone has left. So I guess everyone was just like, oh, damn.
Jesus.
Didn't see that coming.
Doesn't your wife attend symposiums? Have you not gone to one with her?
Oh man,
Have
yeah,
you
she
ever been
attends
to a symposium?
symposiums. Yeah, I've been to
That's
symposiums for my day job. It's I can't say I'm a fan. Maybe they just all went to like the sandwich buffet or something. Just like, all right, well, let's go get some. What's that drink called? What's that drink called?
Which one?
The one that they're drinking at the bar at 9 a.m.
It could be whatever, a Silurian sunrise.
Wow. So that's what everyone just went and got fake shit faced at the bar.
That was a very enjoyable summary, but you haven't even gotten to the best part.
Picard's like back at home, just chilling. And just missing Vash and stuff, being a complicated human being. And and she shows up in like an old school, kind of like, I feel like they want it to be an archaeological outfit. It looks like a safari outfit. They're probably the same thing. Anyway, she shows up, and yes, actually, just she's wearing a hat, just like the a pit helmet, just like or a pit helmet,
yes,
just like
which
Sohail right now.
I can't put over my head properly, but
yeah,
this is the one. This is an important one because Jaymie, this is the one I wore on El Camino where you and I met.
Where we met.
Anyways.
No, it's cool. So yeah, she shows up, and Picard's like, "Woo, what up?" And he's like, "What happened?" She's like, "I just had to hang back, have a few discussions with Q," and then boom, Q shows up. She's like, "By the way, this is my new partner," and I think she means like traveling partner. Because for like a good little while, I was like, "Wait, she's like straight up boning Q now? Like, what the fuck?" That's like a weird twist.
Actually, it might actually be part of the arrangement.
All right.
Who knows?
Is
a funny.
Yeah,
she's a funny, immortal, omnipotent being.
Yeah, she sure is. So she shows up and basically it's just like, look, Picard, I'm down with you. You got to be down with me. And he's like, yeah, whatever, man. He just spills his emotions out. And then she's like, but also I'm gonna go like travel the galaxy for all time and space and whatever. I'll come back when like I need a dick appointment or something like that. So he's basically like, oh, he like freaks out when Q shows up, and he's like, he calls him like disreputable. He calls him conniving and not to be trusted. And she's just like, well, doesn't that remind you of anyone? And he's like, God damn it. And you can just tell he's like so sexually frustrated in that moment. And I don't know. And then Q and Vash just kind of like zip off into the ether and go do their thing. And they're like traveling around together. And Picard's, like smiles.
That's it. And Bob's right.
Credits. Yeah.
So we actually find out what happens to Vash in Deep Space Nine, and we've already recorded the Drunk Space Nine episode about that episode.
That is some podcast synergy right there.
That's true. So now when you hear this, you can go and listen to that episode of Drunk Space Nine afterwards. That was excellent summary. It was
it was pretty long. I feel like that was a 15-minute summary.
I think I always think that like the summary suits the episode, and like that this episode was quite dense and deserved a lot of exposition. So I was delighted by it, and you made it very entertaining. So thank you very much.
Happy to hear
it. So what questions do you have? Because I can imagine you're probably because you don't watch you're kind of watching it episodically, like it was designed to sort of do. Like you can kind of pop into any point of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and so how are you enjoying the show like that? And what questions do you have about this episode? I'm dying to know.
I actually love watching the show episodically because I will admit I at one point had started watching it like all from front to back, and I was just like, damn, it's a lot of TV. Like these television seasons used to be so long. You know what I mean? So I mean, I really enjoy it because I'm familiar enough with the characters from having watched the show over the years that I can kind of hop in, and there aren't often new faces who surprise me. So, which, kind of leads to the next thing, which is that I didn't know anything about Vash. I mean, now you're telling me she was introduced in a previous episode. So, like, what's the deal with her?
So, Captain Picard goes on this, holiday because his crew insists that he's working too hard, and so he goes to a planet called Risa, if I'm not mistaken. It's known for, it's just like coming to Miami but in space. It's known for beaches and relaxation and strange adventures. And so
right.
And that was not my official pitch for Miami.
Do you want strange adventures? Miami.
Come to Miami for strange adventures. So he meets Vash there, and she is trying to get a hold of an artifact, but she has ulterior motives. At first she kind of the same thing. That's why he doesn't really trust her, is because she was saying that she's working in an official capacity for some institute, when in fact she was going to sell the artifact to a Ferengi treasures dealer or something like that. So it was a kind of an interesting little thing, but of course to hide herself from the same Ferengi who she's running from, because she hasn't found the artifact, she immediately introduces herself by kissing Picard, saying, one of those pretend you're kissing me or whatever, kind of things, right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so then it becomes this whole thing, and they have a very romantic time, and everyone's happy for the captain, because as far as we know, he's not a very sexually inquisitive
and he's trying to let loose a little bit.
But then I love this episode because in the follow-up we get this, and it's true, and it's kind of you don't think about Vash ever again. She doesn't come up again, and so I like that the episode immediately addresses that when she's going around meeting the crew and nobody has a clue of who she is.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely I thought it was cool that they basically tried to make a weird romantic comedy out of the episode. I'm using comedy loosely there, but
no, I thought there were a lot of gags in this episode. I think it's meant to be a very funny
episode. It's definitely meant to be a bit goofy, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And I loved it. Like I immediately when like Vash just showed up and they kissed, I was just like, what the fuck? Why did I have to listen to that whole thing about the archaeological symposium speech at the beginning? It blew my mind. And I know that may not be intentional comedy, but I was like, they literally made me sit through that entire discussion with Counselor Troy for nothing. I get it. I guess they wanted to justify her showing up, but whatever. They could have just started the episode and have him be like, "Oh, that archaeological symposium is going to be such a bummer," and bam, she shows up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man. It was cool because it was a really cool entrance and it was surprising, and I was laughing the whole time because it was so sexy. It was like genuinely sexy.
It was a really good.
Yeah.
Watching it again, it still holds up. I also noticed like a ton of things that that I think like dates the show in terms of how it deals with female characters and female leads. Something that I noticed when we were talking about the previous episode that Vash is in is that Picard says the woman. He's constantly referring to her as the woman, and I was like, oh, I get that maybe that there's a reference to the Sherlock Holmes relationship between Holmes and Irina Adler, which is I think that's like where writers
like
tend to go when with that.
It's like a template for this story, if you will.
Like I think that like this kind of character of Picard, who's like, I think you can relate him to Sherlock Holmes in many ways because Sherlock Holmes like has a singular focus, and like Picard, as a captain, seems to have a very singular focus as well, and he's really good at his job. Like he's the best. That's why he's on the flagship of the Federation, the Enterprise. So I think that like. The whole premise in this episode of Vash being his Achilles heel or his downfall and him not accepting that was kind of interesting. And it kind of harkens back to like the first time I think I ever remember seeing that kind of dynamic was in that Sherlock Holmes story, actually, when I read it when I was a kid.
Right.
So
I mean, I think it's one thing for sure. I actually think it's like a pretty relatable story regardless of your gender, when it like just the archetype of feelings being a vulnerability that prevent you from being successful in your professional life or something like that. But yeah, you're definitely right in terms of like the story was really only ever told with like men being held up by women. Probably up until very recently, and it still mostly is told that way to this day, which is unfortunate. But
it is interesting. I think that that like while being while being so obvious in that, it's still a delightful episode, I think, despite like any of these like kind of like periodic flaws that that it may.
Yeah, of course. And I mean it's hard because it's a show that is so thoughtful in many ways that it almost feels unfortunate to like criticize it for that, because you're like, well, it actually did so much better than so many other shows at the time.
But Star Trek gets it wrong. I don't know if you remember in season 1, which is kind of rough for TNG. There is a very sort of overtly racist kind of episode, and the crew at the time, the cast even were like they objected to the episode, but like in that time, like whoever the director of that episode was made all these decisions, and apparently he had enough clout where he could be like, no, I am the ultimate voice on this.
Man.
Yeah, it was so
that's
even
horrible.
These shows, everything's vulnerable to like the people that are behind the scenes ultimately. Well, so I see what you're saying.
All of this is that this show was made in a studio system that, I mean, it's so easy to forget what television was like prior to Netflix and streaming, let alone like in the 80s and 90s, where like there were just a handful of voices dictating everything. Like, man, television has undergone such an intense democratization in the past decade that I mean, and it's so much better for it. Thank God. But yeah, I mean, watching these shows, you definitely are going to come across that. Like that is even with a show that occasionally can be as forward thinking as Star Trek. It's like, yeah, there are definitely going to be episodes that are also just horrible. Like you want to erase from the memory. Like I remember watching. This is a bit of a tangent, but I remember watching Cheers
Oh,
in like
cheers.
in the order that it aired, and in the very first season. I think it's like the third episode. One of the plot points, the like whole plot point for the episode is that someone's daughter is dating a black man. And it's
Oh,
like, and they really like they really throw a lot of sympathy to the character who's like, I just can't accept this, and they play it up for a lot of jokes and stuff. And it was like, oh, even a show as great as Cheers, which honest to God, I do believe is one of the greatest sitcoms ever made for television, one of the most influential shows ever made. There are episodes where it's like, yeah, no, this is like this could just be discarded from the canon. You know what I mean? It's bad. And it's all fair ground. I mean, you of course you have to kill your darlings, right? You have to be willing to criticize everything. But
it's
that was a
true.
tangent.
I love that. I love that expression, "Kill your darlings."
Best.
A colleague of mine used to, when I was editing photos, she would always say, "Kill your darlings," and I would it would push me just to like make that edit just a little bit better.
Yep. Anyone, yeah, any creative types listening, like kill your darlings is the way, like you have to live by that expression.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
Um,
Going back to that though, I think sentiment aside, I do think it is important to wipe that from like canon in the sense that like it's obvious that like especially in Star Trek, it's obvious to anyone who kind of like hopes for a better future that like the future that Star Trek is trying to depict evolves as well based on the societal norms, and that also Star Trek's trying to teach something to the society of its time, which is interesting too. So it's like in a way sometimes when a show no longer has that relevance of like, which is kind of a positive thing that we've grown past that kind of mindset. So we're looking at it like, oh my gosh, what's going on with Star Trek? It's like an old-fashioned idea, but maybe Star Trek at the time it was relevant because it got people to think about how they were speaking and what they were saying and things like that. So
I mean, if anything, it shows a lot of progress in the collective consciousness. If we can all look back at one episode and be like, "Hey, wow, we're like past that now. Like we're more civilized cool than they were in this fictional future."
And only 30 years. That's actually not bad, right?
Yeah.
It seems like it took hundreds of years for these kinds of mindsets to.
It does, yeah. I think the hard part is getting those ideas to really be widespread. I mean, it's easy for you and I to sit here and talk about it. We're clearly politically aligned. You know what I mean? It's not like we're going out into the streets and like trying to like convince the alt-right of the error of their ways. But so it does take longer for these ideas to take hold with people who say might be a little more reluctant to change. But hey, it's a work in progress. Isn't that what Star Trek is all about?
It is indeed. Wow, that was an epic little tangent that we just went on. Thank you.
Hey, man. I mean,
I have an important note, and this should have been at the this should have been at the beginning of the episode here, Jaymie. But I want you to know that this is considered the first official episode of Starfleet Boy where we're announcing that we have a brand new original theme song, and and I'm honored to say that it was composed by you. So thank you for providing us with that theme song.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah.
But by the time this episode is published, the theme will already be prevalent in about like 5 or 6 episodes. So
I'm cool with that. Just speak to my lawyer about what that means for royalties, okay?
Sure thing, no problem.
He can be hard to reach, but I mean, if you contact my agent, you might be able to get to me, and I might be able to get you a number for my lawyer.
My royalty contract with you, Jaymie, is anything you want.
Oh. Damn. It's like I'm Picard and you're Vash.
Whoa.
I'm just
Does
kidding.
that
I'm
makes
just
Simon
kidding.
Beverly?
Oh, Sima
We'll
being
have to.
Sima, of
We can
course.
reenact that scene when I come to Montreal and have breakfast with you guys at your house. So
Right,
that'll be nice.
immediately after recording this podcast.
Right.
Yeah, you're hopping on the private jet, coming up, having breakfast. No, yeah, thank you for having the podcast, and to all the listeners out there, having the podcast, having the theme song, and to all the listeners out there, I hope you enjoy it. And
and
if
may
you
I
have a
ask?
podcast, yeah.
Oh, you were gonna say
Oh,
what I was
look,
gonna
I was just
ask.
gonna do a little thing and
You're
say,
gonna do it. I was gonna go
if you
do
have
it.
a
Do it.
podcast and you need a theme song, if you have a show and you need some music, just ask Sohail how to contact me. Just
Oh, I like
contact
that.
Starfleet Boy. So I know that it's coming from a referral from him.
You
And
can
I'll be happy to chat with you about it.
write to me at starfleetboy@gmail.com or sohail@starfleetboy.com. And you can follow Jaymie on Twitter, and your handle changed recently, so you'll have to
It's
have to
at
remember the old.
Brain Doo Doo. So
Oh, it's the
that's
same
Brain. It's still the same. My Twitter name
name
changes on
change.
an almost weekly basis. It's just
Nice.
part of my
Okay.
comedy. My Twitter handle is at Brain Doo Doo. So that's BrainDoodoo. Definitely
Excellent.
follow me for some really, really sad jokes and some altogether pretty cool content. Wow, what a pitch for my Twitter.
Hey, Jaymie, one more thing before we end this segment of Starfleet Boy. On my map of the world on my podcast service, it shows like the cities that are most active, and this might just be you and maybe one other person in Montreal, but there's quite a few downloads happening in Montreal. So I was wondering if you would also take a moment to specifically speak to our Montreal audience about any endeavors you might want them to know about that are, since this is not a time sensitive podcast, you could just tell them in general what you're doing and how
Oh,
to
sure.
learn more about what you're doing.
By the way, Sohail, I've never downloaded your podcast.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm just kidding. You
So
know
that's
what?
a genuine
Actually,
that's good though, actually, because that tells me that's a genuinely separate entity from you that's
I mean,
listening
yeah,
to
that is good. I meant that like it was supposed to be a compliment disguised as a jab. Yeah. For anyone listening in Montreal, I perform a lot of comedy, actually, over at the Montreal Improv Theater, which is on Saint Laurent Boulevard, at the cross street, I believe, is Des Pins or Pine, depending on how Anglophone you are. We got shows going on there all the time. I produce a show that happens every 2 Wednesdays. It's called The Haunt, and you can check it out. Just Google it. Just Google Montreal Improv The Haunt. You'll find it. We're on Facebook. We got shows every 2 weeks. It's a good time. It's very casual. There's no pressure. No comedians are going to pick on you or anything like that. We don't do that. We love our audience members, and we love having a good time. It's also not overtly profane. We don't fuck with anything that's offensive or even really too edgy. So I really, really encourage you to check out this really inclusive, cool comedy space. And hey, if you ever wanted to do any comedy, whether it be sketch, improv, maybe you want to meet some stand-ups, Montreal Improv Theater is a great place to go and start learning your craft. They have classes there all the time. I'm not an official spokesperson for the theater, but I did come up through there myself, and it's a really good time. Should we get back to our episode, Sohail?
Yeah, that was great. All right, so
Thanks for letting me plug all that. Wow.
no, I think that's wonderful. I feel like I don't give enough of a platform to my guests to tell what they're doing, and I think it's important that I should. So maybe this is
Nice.
the start of something new.
Wow. Turning a new page. All right, so I definitely have some things to say about this episode. I got a few comments here. So we already talked about drinking in the morning. Okay, well,
I already explained synthahol to you, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah. So
You get it.
synthahol,
Yeah.
which I'm now realizing stands for synthetic alcohol.
Right, exactly.
so there's like a synthetic drunkenness that comes with it, which is crazy.
As any good, TV show would do. It's not explicitly explained, but as any good fan base has done, they've taken all the references. Many fans have kind of gone through all the references of synthahol, and they've extrapolated that it is fundamentally some kind of compound that simulates the exact effects that whatever alcohol version of that synthetic.
Right.
So you have
So just
synthetic
stumbling
whiskey
through a street at 3 a.m. looking for some French fries.
Right. All of that can happen with synthahol, but as soon as I think my theory is that as soon as adrenaline hits your system, the alcoholic effects disappear through a chemical reaction, and now you're functioning as you would in a sober situation.
So what if someone came in and administered a drug that also slows your adrenaline generation? Would you just be drunk on the bridge?
Well, like any compound, there have been cases in Star Trek on TV of people who are not who are immune to the synthahol benefits, and so therefore they will actually be intoxicated for real as you would be on alcohol. Yeah, and medical science in Star Trek is so advanced. I imagine that you see evidence of it in the original series where Scotty would be drinking all night, and then the next morning he's in sick bay and Dr. McCoy gives him an injection of something that just normalizes his entire fluidic function or whatever chemical function, so that he's operating at a baseline of some kind. Whoa. So yeah, it's
wow. Definitely speak to your doctor before consuming synthahol, everyone.
It's still, and then we were wondering, the reason the question came up was we were wondering if there should be an age limit, because it's not explicitly stated on Star Trek whether or not you have to be a certain age to start drinking synthahol.
Well, maybe they have a European approach where it's just you're 7 years old. Here's a glass of synthahol. See what this does. Find out for yourself, kid. Here's a pack of cigarettes too.
So a person who was on the discussion yesterday, his name is Sean. I don't know if you know him.
I don't think we've met.
YouTube. He took a bit of umbrage to that notion of how Europeans treat drinking culture, because I think
he European.
He lived in France for a time, and he didn't get the impression that was the case. But I had the opposite. I had your impression.
Yeah,
because
I've been to France several times. I am definitely sure that.
We must just go. Birds of a feather flock together. So we must just go to these cities where that.
Oh man.
Excellent.
Yeah,
so that's synthahol. That was your question about the drunkenness,
so
but yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. Well, okay, so something else I wanted to bring up before I really get into anything substantial about the episode is that Captain Picard's pajamas are the sexiest goddamn thing I've ever seen. I want a pair of those pajamas for myself.
I think that's on Etsy. There, I guarantee. As a matter of fact, I'll do a quick search.
Well, I mean, it's still in your history, right? It's still in your browsing history.
Picard pajamas. Let's see what happens when we type Picard pajamas on Etsy. And let's see here. I don't see anything that comes up right away, but I make this pledge to you that if you want, part of my time when I come to Montreal could be that we could go and get the materials necessary and sew. It's a very simple garment.
It's very simple. Honestly, you can just buy any V-neck T-shirt and then expand the V-neck out to your belly button, and then find some real short shorts that are kind of loose and light, and you're good.
You're good to go. It's true. It's a very sexy outfit. You know that Patrick Stewart, if I'm not mistaken, was voted sexiest man alive or something like that by People magazine at one point. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
I remember in high school that at the time at this time in high school I was quite bottled up about. I was very much like Picard. I kept my
your emotions.
My emotions pretty private,
Right.
especially when it came to romance. So I don't remember
Uh-huh.
commenting on it in public, but I always remember a friend of mine who had a very like she had a zeal for Patrick Stewart, and she had posters, and she was like constantly like commenting that that he had just a very nice definition, and
He
that she could tell
does.
that he
Oh
worked.
yeah. I mean, that's the whole selling
Yeah.
point for him. Like he's like one of those guys you're like, "Yeah, I'm kind of looking at you like neck down." You know what I mean? Like no disrespect to his balding head. And I think balding is generous because really it's like balded. Like I don't know how young he lost his hair, but
I think he was like me. As you know, I am underneath this wig. I am a bald man, like
right,
just the front of the car.
it's true. But your wigs look fantastic.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Uh,
you.
actually, you know what? You definitely rock a wig the best of anyone I know. So
Oh wow,
better than even Captain Picard could. So
which he does on Star Trek, and he
is
has
that right?
done. Yeah, yeah. It's whenever whenever they show young Picard, he always has more hair. The character always does. There's an anecdote
Nice.
that you may not know about, where uh Patrick Stewart actually was in a conversation with Gene Roddenberry, and I forget the kind of details of the conversation, but more or less it was brought up that wouldn't there have been a cure for baldness in the in the future, right? Like
Oh boy.
why? And uh, and Gene Roddenberry said something. His answer was really profound. He said something to the effect of, "Well, in the future, no one cares." And so that's like,
Hey,
like, yeah, it was like a really cool
that's
answer,
a
I thought.
yeah. It sounds like Patrick Stewart probably spent the rest of his life being like, in the future, no one will care. It's cool. And you know what? It's small fish. Who cares? To all our bald listeners, you guys look great. Fucking rock. Rock, man. You wax
It's
that
true.
dome, make it look good, shave down the crown, man. Don't let that shit grow out. Okay, take care of yourself. You're beautiful. You deserve it. All right. One thing I really need to talk about in this episode is Worf as the comedic relief of the episode.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so they're definitely,
I think he often is. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I guess he often is. So, but he can also be so serious, and like anytime there's any kind of fight, he's like, just like he's. I guess he's supposed to be impressive yielding weapons, but every time I see him do it, I'm like, you just look like a kid running around with like a toy. But okay, so first we get he's it's a bit whatever. It's kind of objectifying Vash, but we'll skip that for now. Um, he comments on her appearance. He's
Oh,
because
he's like nice legs for
nice legs
yeah.
for a human. It was great. It was mostly funny because he's not that funny. Like that line, yeah, I don't know. That line was yeah, I don't know. It had comedic effect in the episode. And then most importantly, when they get to Nottingham, Worf is just like complaining about his costume so much. And it's so fitting that he would be like, yo, theater is so stupid. Like, look, I don't want to be wearing these tights. It's fantastic. And then, of course, there's him just smashing LaForge's loot in what I read was a tribute to Animal House.
Oh, that was totally lost on me. That's
Right. Yeah. So
okay.
it was lost on me too until I read about it, to be honest. But if
It's
we got
been
any,
it's been a I was exposed to Animal House at a age where I probably should not have been. So it's been way too long since
right.
I've seen Animal
As
House.
immediately as you exited the womb, you watched Animal House.
It was on the TV at the hospital where I was
Right. Yeah. It's a romp. It's a romp. It's great. Uh, yeah. So just him smashing that loot and then immediately being like, sorry. It was great. It was great. I loved it. Especially because LaForge
That
could
was a
not
great
play that loot.
That was a great scene in and of itself. I have to remark that I thought everyone really looked fit in their period, non-period weird costumes. But I have to say that like LeVar Burton's stances were particularly interesting to me. I just
Yeah.
felt like in most of the group shots, I noticed there were a lot of group shots in the episode where everyone seems to be doing something. There's one bizarre one where Troy seems to be shooting like invisible arrows or arrow practicing with invisible arrows in the background with Data, and there's always something going on where there's a group shot. But LeVar's just kind of standing. Jordy's always standing with his lute and just like perfectly posed.
It's great. It's great. The writers definitely had like a lot of fun with this one.
And it seems like the cast definitely did too. And I think that it's interesting because this is not our first introduction. Q, how many Q episodes have you seen, if any?
The only other one I've like actually paid very much attention to is, I believe, the pilot.
Like his first. Okay, great. So you understand already. You already know like that he can do pretty much anything. Like we're not really sure that there's a limit to Q's power.
Right.
And he's an interesting character because I think every season there's definitely like a Q episode. And so this is an interesting episode because it's establishing Vash as like a reoccurring character, and now Q, of course, is in there too. And there is a shift. You'll see Q's role kind of go from like that seriousness that you encounter in the pilot episode to like he's basically now just entertainment value. Like he just shows up and
that's what was so surprising to me about this episode.
Really bad happens ever. Not really.
Like he didn't feel threatening at any point in this episode, except that one time he showed up in the ceiling. That was, I stand by that being real weird. But it was like he's funny. He's the actor's name escapes me at the moment, but
John Delancey.
Right? He's so charismatic in the role, and it was just awesome. And it's so much more fun to watch them have a kind of playful dynamic than to have them just have a standard good guy, bad guy dynamic, which is kind of what bored me about the pilot, because the pilot has all that fucking medieval shit too. Excuse my language. It's just like, I don't know. This was a lot more fun for me, and it actually endeared me to the character a lot more
cool.
than I had previously been. There was one more thing I wanted to mention real quick about Worf. So as I previously mentioned, every time there's a fight that breaks out, he's supposed to like really be impressive, and I know this. But if you watch this episode, so when they get zapped down to Nottingham, one of the first things that happens is someone shows up, a Sir Guy shows up on a horse, and they have a sword fight. And I just want everyone to go back and watch Worf charge at the horse with that sword, because it looks absolutely fucking crazy. He is like not running straight. He's just lifting. In the one shot, he's got the sword way up in the air, and he's just like flailing it. And then the camera cuts to the horse, and he's like charging towards it, and the sword isn't even in the air anymore. It's wild, man. It is just wild. Anyway, they could have used I realized they wrote and shot these episodes in like very small amounts of time, so they didn't have much time to practice the stunt coordination. But it was baffling. Oh, there he is.
This is just
he looks great in that outfit.
I am not a merry man. That's what he's like angrily declares, which I thought was another funny line. And then Data creeps says, actually, the way you're dressed, you're Will Scarlet.
Data had a surprisingly small role in this episode. It's the first episode I've seen that really has so little Data, but he was enjoyable when he was on screen.
It's true. I usually give you Data heavy episodes.
I love my boy Data.
This is a little bit of a change on that.
Another costume. Sorry to cut you off.
There's none of that formality. We're having a casual and informal discussion. On Starfleet.
The executioner in this episode, role of a lifetime for a costume designer, because someone designed that costume to be as hilarious as possible. Basically, if you think of the most cliche executioner in medieval times, that is exactly what they made. He's like I mean, they obviously got like a bodybuilder or something.
Yeah.
He's wearing like this black vest that like has a lace tie at the chest, and he's wearing this giant black hood with two little holes for the eyes, some very tight pants, and holding the tackiest axe you could ever imagine. And it is just great. He doesn't say anything. It I don't know. It was just like straight out of like a fairy tale or something. It was beautiful.
There, there are sadly no screen caps
Of the executioner.
readily available, or I'm not able to or maybe I'm not using the correct search criterion, but I agree with everything you said. It was like a
Well, and so further to my point, the executioner is terrible at his fucking job. Because if you watch the episode, so right as Picard and Vash are about to be executed, he's like holding the axe in the air, and the rest of the crew suddenly busts out. They're like, boom, swords and shit. And the executioner just waits there with the sword in the air, and Picard does like the slowest, like, he like jumps up, grabs the sword, and stabs the executioner, and it takes like 6 seconds, and the whole time the executioner is just standing there. Once again, I know they didn't have a lot of time to like work on the stunt coordination, and I know Star Trek is not an action show, but it was just like, damn, they would definitely be dead if that executioner was competent. I don't know, maybe he was like in the hall or something. But it was like a pretty funny. It was one of those Star Trek moments where it was like, this would definitely not have gone down this way. But it was great. Another
That's
plot
really
point. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I totally didn't notice any of that, which is hilarious.
It's pretty clunky. It's a pretty clunky scene altogether, I'd say.
My brain must shut off like in really bad scenes on Star Trek.
I think that's what they're banking on. It's just like, yeah, you know, you getting up to go get some popcorn or something.
I totally missed it. That must have been when I went to get my coffee.
The other plot point I found really lousy in this episode was so when they initially get transported down to Nottingham, they show up, they are confronted by Sir Guy and a couple of his henchmen, and they run off into the bushes. And Sir Guy's henchmen like go to follow them, and Sir Guy just goes, "Stop there! We'll never find them in the Greenwood." And like literally like the least dense bush you've ever seen. And then they cut to the cast in this Greenwood, and there's like no trees. There's like some foliage on the ground. And I was like, how are they never gonna find them here? And they spend the rest of the episode hiding there. It is the laziest piece of writing this episode had to offer. But it was very fun.
Enough, you fools! But you have to admit, the actor who plays Sir Guy sells it.
I mean, yeah, I guess he does.
He like those lines are just designed for his his like wonderful voice.
I feel like the writers really left him with a lot of the heavy lifting on that line. You know what I mean? He really had to sell the Greenwood being that dense and that massive. It was a good time. Give me a little chuckle, that's for sure.
I liked the kind of references to Middle Ages cures for maladies, because like when Vash has popped into her role as Marion, she doesn't have the benefit of knowing, you know, what Q has done, so she's just totally confused. And the one like nurse who's tending to her is like, oh, I've got something perfect for brain sickness. It's leeches. She's like...
and she actually says like to drain you of your disease.
Yeah, to drain.
It's disgusting.
I do like that, like little things like that are thrown into the episode that maybe didn't need to be, but they are kind of accurate.
Right.
In a comedic sense, but accurate to like the time.
Totally, man. I mean, I don't know about you, but anytime I'm hungover, I just get the leeches out. And no.
What about the scene? Did you? There's so many gags. I have like so many notes on gags, but one of my favorite scenes is when Troy is they're all getting ready to go to the, to go into the fight, and they're showing like a montage sequence of everyone like weaponizing basically, and Troy's like trying to aim, and she shoots her arrow and it doesn't hit the tree, and then the camera like pans over and you see Data with like
with an
arrow
arrow in his chest.
in his chest, like
It was great.
it was like,
Yeah, and
that
he just has no reaction. He's like, "Oh yeah, it
oh.
slips right in between these processors, and I'm fine." Uh, yeah, it was great.
What I have a question the episode begs this question, I think, which is given the chance to travel with Q, would you listen to Picard or would you listen to Vash?
I would definitely listen to Vash. I
You would
feel
just
like
go.
she has a more fun life than Picard. Like Picard is like so he's just so, I don't know, he's so rigid in his ways. And I mean, I'm sure at the end of the day he ends up with a more rewarding life, but she's like just traveling around, just, kind of having fun, drifting uh through the cosmos. Sounds nice to me.
Yeah, it does sound pretty nice. I would have trouble staying behind as well and not accepting Q's proposal. I did think it was kind of awkward and maybe strange, and I don't know if this is just how future people react to things like this, but like Picard has to go through this huge kind of emotional breakdown where he has to reveal, he has to break this wall that he's created between his crew and his personal life, right?
Yeah.
And so that's all good. We get that, like, Q actually does end up helping him through, even though he does it in the most kind of annoying and perhaps nefarious uh way.
Yeah, the classic, you either die or you reveal your feelings to your
Feelings, right?
crew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so it's like so here we have that situation, and I thought, I don't know if you got this from the episode, but I thought he was also admitting like his deep love for Vash. And so in that end sequence where my question was born from, I was I was wondering, like, how, do future people just get over stuff really quickly? Because he's just like, stay
He's
stay
fine.
behind.
Yeah.
He's like, stay behind, don't go off with Q. And you could tell he's like, even like, aware that there might be romantic liaisons present,
Yeah.
or at least
Yeah.
Q would attempt them.
In a weird
Maybe
way, it
Q
was
wouldn't.
kind of mirroring the scene earlier in the episode with Beverly Crusher and Bosch,
Mm.
because it's like she's kind of two-timing these dudes now. Uh, for lack of a better term. But okay, to answer your question, I mean, I think Picard is just kind of emotionally dumb, to be honest.
Oh,
'Cause I mean, I feel like, he makes some progress during the episode, but at the end of the day, at the end of the episode, for television's purposes, he kind of has to resume his character. So he's like, yeah, okay, well, I'll see her in a bit. I'll see her next season or something, or as it would turn out in Deep Space Nine. So yeah, I don't know, because I mean, I look at other episodes, especially the ones I've seen, and I mean, even Data like has things that he holds on to, and he's like, yeah, that's like as close as I get to emotion. And if he can do that, then I don't think people in the future are like just getting over things, I mean, if
yeah,
people
it's
were
kind of
just getting over
interesting.
things, then Q, this like immortal being Q, wouldn't be showing up to be like, yo, we gotta like, even this out. We gotta like get back to a clean slate.
It's a
So
really good point. That's a good point. I guess just people are just more composed in the future than perhaps we're used to in our present times, and that
right,
that might be the difference.
yeah,
Very
interesting,
nice.
isn't it?
Very interesting. Good answers. Good answers. Um, I do think that if you look at Star Trek, the Next Generation as a complete work, and maybe even include the movies, Picard's character is sad in that he never really settles down, at least on screen, with any companion. Like we all kind of root for him and Dr. Crusher to get together. And I will tell you right now, this is a show laden with spoilers because the discussion requires it, Jaymie. So I
It's also
apologize, but they never get
dirty.
together.
Right, right. What happens to Dr. Beverly Crusher?
So by the end of Star Trek, you'll get a glimpse at an alternate timeline where Captain Picard and Dr. Crusher got married, but then divorced. So you get a like a view into the future, but it is presented as an alternate timeline, and as we know from movies like Back to the Future, once you've seen the future, you you
It's
might
no
have the
longer the future in
it's
question.
no longer the future in question, exactly. So
Right. That's crazy. Yeah.
it's an interesting
It is
thing.
unfortunate. I mean, he definitely deserves to be with someone. He's clearly a very affectionate human being because every time he does have some romantic thing going on, he's down for it. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he made that breakfast for
You don't think it was replicated? You don't think he like just went to the computer and said, "Oh, breakfast
like,
and
yeah,
tea"?
yo, breakfast. I don't know, man. I get the vibe. He was so like, I mean, he can shut things down in a second if he wants to. Like, look at his first interaction with Q in this episode. He's just like, yeah, no, we're good. The only mistake I ever made was not letting you die last time. Yeah, he says that, and he burns the shit out of Q. So I mean, I think he can be quite cold, but as soon as she shows up, he's like a totally different person. So he definitely deserves it, and I think on some level he wants it. But maybe that's just the tragedy of the character. Maybe the future, love is the one thing the future can't fix.
One of the great things about Q as a device is that he always kind of sheds light on these kind of over the top characteristics, or like these characteristics that like maybe are not as desirable about these characters. And it kind of like, I look at Q as like an ego check for for the Enterprise, because when you think about and it's kind of hinted at in this episode, because Vash knows who Commander Riker is and like things like that. The Enterprise at this point in the show has already saved the Earth from destruction from an attack by the evil Borg.
Right.
And so so they're famous, they're like super famous, like that's got to be hard. I mean, like everyone's kind of like glued to like, what's the Enterprise doing next? And so they have to like, every symposium has to be the best symposium, and every
Right.
like
Right. Every symposium, dude. Not one symposium left behind.
It's kind of the best way to be famous, is to be like famous for doing your job really, really well.
That's definitely how people want to be famous. You don't want to be famous for doing it poorly or doing something outrageous. Yeah.
But so many are famous for that. It's
Oh
interesting.
yeah. Shout out to the Kardashians. I'm sure they're all listening.
Oh boy. Hey, if there
Ah,
are any
Kardashians listening.
if there are any fans of Keeping Up with the Kardashians who also are listening to this podcast, or watching it
What a
on
diverse
YouTube,
portfolio of
yeah,
television.
we would love to hear from you. And I'd be curious, because I have to say that, like, when it's on TV, I generally have to watch the
Right. You know what? I'll
the
admit,
thing that's happening on the
yeah,
Kardashians.
my life partner, my wife, definitely
Keeps up with those
she keeps up with the
Kardashians.
Kardashians. Yeah, and you know what? I will say they've come quite a long way as far as their public personas are concerned. I'm still like
I
worried about that Get Out thing that they might be doing
Oh,
to
I don't know
everyone.
anything. I don't know anything quite that deep. But what I will say
Yeah,
is that what I will say is that there is a Star Trek connection.
is that right?
Well, yeah. So I don't know how much Deep Space Nine you've watched, but or if you remember the Cardassians, which are which are they are an alien race
Oh,
that becomes more prominent in Star Trek during Deep Space Nine. But so I've always thought it'd be great if we had a show called Keeping Up with the Cardassians, and it was the
wow!
Cardassian
Just
family.
keeping up with the Kardashian planet race. Yeah. Hey, man, you could pitch it.
I don't think I can get credit. I think it's already been pitched
Well,
by the
maybe
collective
not.
consciousness has
Maybe
already
Star
pitched
Trek
it.
Discovery season 2 needs a new angle. So
It'd be great if a Kardashian could play the Cardassians That would be
We are definitely not far. Like we live in a universe where that is very possible.
very possible. It's true.
I mean, I'm sure you've heard Quentin Tarantino is in talks to direct Star Trek.
Yeah, it's such a world when I'm trying my best to only go to official sources for
Right.
information, so like press releases and things like that. But yeah, I went through an emotional kind of roller coaster with that, and
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
we all did. Yeah, especially
so,
with recent revelations.
yeah. So I don't know where that's at, but as a director, I appreciate Quentin Tarantino's work immensely. So I would be totally down. And I heard that Patrick Stewart was also down to work with Tarantino. But we threw around some other names in a previous discussion, which I'd be very happy with too. Which is Peter Weir is one of them.
Okay.
And I'm gonna butcher his name, but the director of Thor Ragnarok.
Taika Waititi.
Thank you, Taika Waititi.
I'm right there for you, buddy.
He was thrown into the pool too, and
he would definitely be very qualified.
So there's a lot of talent out there, which would contribute greatly to a Star Trek Next Generation film. And part of Starfleet Boys' mission, Jaymie, Starfleet Lord, which by the way, that's your actual title.
Oh, that's right. I'm Starfleet.
It's like you're Starfleet Lord, not Starfleet man. Claim your heritage on the show, Starfleet Lord.
Lord.
One of our missions, something that we espouse and support on this show, is that the original, Star Trek is not just about the characters, but also about the people who play and the people who produce these films. And it's always been very intimate. There's always been a very intimate relationship, kind of, I would say, between fans and the cast. I mean, like, just the amount of times you can go see them in public, you could take a cruise with them. I mean, they're very near and dear to us. So I am a proponent of the Next Generation crew and cast and production teams that worked on those films having one more, like, a send-off film, kind of like the original series crew for Star Trek 6. So I don't know if the cast of TNG are down for this. I can't imagine they're not.
I mean, someone's got to pull them off the Comic-Con circuit. So.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever it takes. Like, if I have to donate, part of my paycheck to Paramount or whoever.
Don't do that, folks. Anyone listening, do not donate to a multi-billion-dollar film studio who have created like a borderline monopoly on creative rights. But sorry, go on.
Anyways, that's one of our missions, is we want to talk about that as much as possible. So spread the word.
Definitely.
If you're ever in a conversation about Star Trek Next Generation, just suggest maybe, hey, wouldn't it be great if TNG
I would definitely watch that. I would definitely come out to the theater for that.
Nice. I might even fly to Montreal just to see it with you. That might be a thing.
And the rest of your Montreal base. Shout out everyone listening.
You
don't know who you are.
Yes, you do, and we would love to hear from you. So.
Definitely.
What notes or questions do you have, Jaymie? Because I feel like the ones you've asked have been superb so far.
Man, let's see. Let me scroll through my notes real quick. Boy, these notes are a mess. You know what? I didn't really have too many other questions. You know what I did notice in this episode is I'd like to watch an episode with more focus on LaForge. I kind of feel like he gets small parts in a lot of the episodes that I see. And
there's been a couple really good ones that have gone by this season, and I think that's the thing that you will enjoy when you watch the show in sequence, is that, like, what you do see a lot of are these kind of in between all the major happenings. There's a lot of great character emphasis episodes, and I think LeVar's had a few. One that comes to mind just recently was the one where he turns into this, like, kind of this alien reproduces by infecting other life forms, and then the other life forms become that being or that species or whatever, and so he's transforming into this thing. And so that was a good Geordi episode. And then there's another episode where we address Geordi's holodeck addiction. Where he had like he had kind of like a holodeck experience with a facsimile of a real engineer named Leah Brahms, and kind of like you could tell he got sweet on Leah Brahms. And then they did a follow-up episode where the real Leah Brahms actually meets him, and so it's actually a very interesting
that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to check those out.
Yeah, so look for those episodes. I'll send you the names. They don't come off the top of my head as easily as they used to.
Yeah. It's all that synthahol you've been drinking.
It is. It must be. Yes, it's true.
I mean, does synthahol like make you gain weight? Like, does it have?
I think it should not. I think that its only purpose is to give you a buzz and then allow you to shake it off.
That's so cool.
At will, yeah.
Damn.
I know
it's not like, instead of an adrenaline thing, I wonder if it's not like once you step outside this boundary, it's like one of those dog collars where it's like it electrocutes you if you go past the boundary. But instead of doing that, it's like, oh, you're outside the perimeter of X space. You're on the bridge, for example. It's like, well, no, we've negated the effects of the synthahol at this point.
Except that the cool thing about the trigger being something like adrenaline is that you're letting the body regulate when the buzz is happening and when it's not happening because of stimulus response. So it allows you to enjoy your buzz as long as you're not stressed, which is it's kind of, I think, part of the reason people drink is to reach that no stress level. But then now you realize with synthahol, by reaching that no stress level, you'll get drunk, which is how you want to be.
Whoa.
And then did I go too crazy here?
No, it's great. It's great. I hope Elon Musk is listening,
or some chemist or something. Like, that'd be awesome. I mean, I don't have the skills to make synthahol happen, but I'd definitely be a consumer of it because it does sound like the magic.
Yeah, it sounds great.
That, like, society needs.
Like, I would immediately, legal or not, I'd be like, synthahol, where can I get it? Hopefully legal, guys. Do you think
I nominate myself to be on the marketing team for synthahol, whoever creates it?
I wonder if there was ever a black market for synthahol in this universe, or say a prohibition era.
It is hard to get actual alcohol. Apparently, synthahol has it is suggested that in the Star Trek future, that synthahol is the ubiquitous kind of recreational drug of choice, but that, like, you can get things like, for example, Picard's family are vintners, and they is that the right term, vintners, when you operate a vineyard?
I guess so.
I don't know. But
I'll have to check in with my friends who run vineyards.
Picard's family operates a vineyard in France, and the Chateau Picard wine, which funny enough, there is an actual Chateau Picard wine from France. Yes, there is. You can get it at the store. But so they kind of align that with real life, which is kind of a cool thing. But anyways, Chateau Picard is something that he has readily available and has served on the show and then in the films as well, and that's actual real alcohol. And so you will see characters enjoying actual alcohol. And Scotty on the original series, and later he'll appear on Next Generation, which I'll try to make sure to wrangle you up for that one. But Scotty from the original series appears on TNG, and he actually calls synthahol swivel, or like it's just hard. So he does not enjoy synthahol. He thinks it does not actually produce the same effects as alcohol.
Yeah, of course, the original cast of like the show, the original cast would definitely be like, no, our captain was kind of fat. Like, we definitely want to be drinking for real. They were like, they're like those old school athletes who would like go and get shit faced after every game. Or like engineers who would just drink at work as soon as it was 5 o'clock. Like, I can't keep working unless I'm got a glass of scotch in my hands.
So I don't know if I fell into like a subculture or what, but when I was living in Seattle, I definitely got the impression that like drinking was was treated a lot differently in Seattle than it is, where I grew up in Miami, and so
Right. Well, I mean, it's different. There are strange adventures happening in Miami.
It's true. So
No one needs
I actually learned in Seattle how to like kind of manage like that buzz or whatever you call it. But it's always a dangerous line because at any given point in your life an emergency can occur. And and so it's like,
Have you ever
that's like
been in an emergency and been like under the influence? Because I know I've definitely had an experience where I've had to like address something serious and I've been under the influence.
wow.
It's a terrible feeling.
I think that like just knowing that this relates to Star Trek in some way, I would say that I'm very curative of my drinking experiences, and I try to like eliminate as many variables as possible before going into them. But even that being said, there have been situations that I vaguely recall where like it felt like an important situation beyond my capabilities
It was
at that
occurring. Yeah.
that was occurring, and so I'm very grateful that that those situations didn't end up being of major consequence. But I will say, yeah, in my wild youth there were definitely some situations.
You were like, I think maybe not being drunk right now would be
the best thing, which Synthahol would have totally like helped you.
Right. Yeah, totally. Now that you mention it, we've inadvertently justified the invention of Synthahol.
It's true, we totally did. So
you're wrong, Scotty.
You're wrong, Scotty. Get me that Synthahol, and it better work on me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right.
We're not stressed. We're not stressed.
Do we? Yes, we are. Do we? But as Andrew WK would say, as Andrew WK would remind us, that is a glorious part of life, and just remember to keep partying.
Keep partying, guys. Life is intense. Shout out to Andrew WK. Great new album.
I'm really enjoying listening to it. Thanks for posting about it because I kind of forgot.
Yeah.
So I think we're at the ratings portion of the episode. Unless you have any more discussion centered around this.
Nah.
I do want to make sure I think I did say something about it, but Dennis McCarthy, who also did the score for the first Star Trek: The Next Generation feature, Star Trek Generations, did the score here, and I noticed it in that scene that I pointed out about Peter Pan. So kudos to him. Right. And also, I thought the director.
Peter Pan?
Did I say Peter Pan?
Did you mean Robin Hood? Yeah, I don't think they were referencing the other early '90s hit. Hook? Have you guys heard of
hilarious.
Hook? Yeah,
that's hilarious. They should have done a Peter Pan Star Trek episode with Captain Picard as Peter Pan. It would have.
Oh my god, that would be wild. Who would be Wendy? Would it be Vash?
It would be Vash or Beverly. I think Beverly could be Wendy Darling for sure. And then the Lost Boys naturally would be the rest.
Just everyone else.
Everyone else would be the Lost Boys.
Who would be Captain Hook? Q, I guess.
I think Q would want that if it was the same template transposed.
Yeah, it would just be the exact same episode.
It would be the same episode, basically almost the same lines.
Right. Actually, I think Sir Guy would be Captain Hook.
I think so.
Q would just be Q.
Q would be Q. It's true. Or he could be. I would think the show would be clever if Q were Tinkerbell.
He would though. He would.
Yeah. So there you go. We've solved.
You know what? Tinkerbell's outfit, now that you mention it, very similar to Picard's pajamas.
It's
Oh, we're peeling back the layers on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
You are so good at this. It's always a delight to have you on. I am always going to new places with you. Thank you.
You are very welcome. The pleasure is mutual.
I guess that reminded me of a note. So Data carries an incendiary device in his arm the whole time.
Yeah.
Like,
Also,
that
okay,
was interesting.
And that device, okay, he uses it to create the distraction I mentioned earlier. Like they create the distraction, and the executioner just freezes, like freeze frames. But the distraction is like a slightly larger flame. Like they have these like kind of like torches around the execution area, and Data just throws his incendiary device that's just hanging out in his arm. He just throws it into there, and the flame just gets slightly larger. Like I imagine there was just someone on set who like cranked up the amount of gas they were letting into the torch or something, and everyone's like, ah! And then everything goes down. It's the turning point of the episode. Once again, it felt like a very TNG action sequence where it's like everything is off here.
The other thing that was kind of off was that they had enough time during this execution for everyone to get a revealing shot of their heads underneath these robes, like in that one sequence. Like, it's like
right. It was like Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, at the beginning. It's like, who's underneath that robe over and over again.
So good. All right. See, there's so many little gags in this episode that we could probably talk about.
It truly is a great I actually really sincerely loved it. And they shot it at Valentine's Day. Just putting it out.
Yeah. Oh, let's go. I guess we could do some trivia. Do you have any more trivia?
No, I will say I was fascinated that they finished the script for the episode on January 31st of that year. They started shooting on February 6th and wrapped up on February 15th.
February 15th. So, that's really neat.
Really quick. I realized they don't have a lot of sets to build because most of the sets are already built for the show. But they did have to do some location shots. And I thought, hey, people work their ass off to make this thing.
Oh, yeah.
As they did every episode. So.
All the location shots were lit beautifully. I thought that like it maintained a cohesive tone throughout the episode, which I always both enjoy and despise when it's an obvious location shot because the lighting is so different on location than the rest of the show. So it was very good.
Definitely. Yeah, the episode looked great. Everyone did a great job. Killer costumes. I loved it.
So typically the person giving the summary gets to go last with ratings, unless you already know your rating and want to go ahead and give it now. It's a 1 to 10 scale.
It's a 1 to 10?
1 to 10, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a Vash out of 10. And that's a 10, ladies and gentlemen, because she's a 10.
Dang, it's a 10 out of 10. Nice.
I actually, you know what? If I had to give this an actual rating, I would probably give this like an 8.5. I really enjoy a genre exploration in a show that already is a genre exploration in and of itself. It was super playful. I can tell everyone was having a blast doing it. Like the cast, I'm sure people who did production design on this had a good time. The writers obviously had a good time. It was just a pleasure to watch. I have to say, sometimes I lose interest in episodes of TNG, especially early episodes. The first season, as you mentioned, is pretty rough. And this episode was just so light on its feet, so much fun, mostly intentionally funny, occasionally unintentionally funny.
Right.
And everyone gave a good performance. I was on board with it the whole way, so definitely like an 8.5 or a Vash out of 10, whatever you guys want to put on the record is cool with me.
Nice.
How about you?
I originally, when this episode aired, probably don't recall. I recall not enjoying it as much as I did as an adult. So when it originally aired, I was still in high school or middle school, even at this point, I think. Yeah. And so it was not interesting. But I remember the first time I actually enjoyed this episode was like in my 20s when I saw it on DVD. And since that, and I was like, which is a good reason to rewatch TV shows, because there's probably as you gain more experiences, sometimes you understand things better, and I think this
new meaning.
And so this is one of those kinds of episodes, and every time I watch it, I find that I am more delighted by it and pick up on new gags. And so just for that, I'm actually going to raise my rating was an 8, but I'm going to raise it to an 8.5 to match you, so that the official
Nice.
Starfleet Boy rating is also 8.5, because I do find that, like, and part of it is because this discussion was so delightful. So
This is
like,
a great discussion. I
it was a really
immediately,
good fun discussion.
for people listening, as soon as I finished watching the episode last night, I like to watch the episodes right before we hop on the podcast. We were recording this in the morning. So I immediately messaged Starfleet Boy being like, I cannot wait to talk to you about this.
Yeah, it was cool. I was excited about it as well.
It was great. It was great. And I mean, isn't that just like the mark of like a great television show, honestly?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm more objective, Star Trek the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek TV show.
I've never even seen an episode, so I
yeah,
should definitely check that out.
It's critically acclaimed, and it also kind of was pushing the envelope in terms of storytelling and breaking that episodic convention. And then the creators of Deep Space Nine, actually, Ron D. Moore, who's one of the writers and producers of that show, went on to do Battlestar Galactica, which is credited as being one of the first kind of like turns in science fiction storytelling of the modern kind of era of television. I'm not sure like that any one show can get credit for the way that we tell stories today. It's always evolving, but I would say that Battlestar Galactica stands out as a hallmark among shows, and I love that it all comes from this like Star Trek pedigree. So I do like watching Star Trek The Next Generation, both with the childlike lens that I that I had when I originally saw it, so that sentimental lens, but then also looking at it in its context, and you seem to enjoy that kind of thing too, so it was fun.
Definitely. I always get a warm feeling anytime I'm watching Star Trek. I love it.
Most excellent. So that concludes our discussion today. I have to say, sadly, goodbye, but I know I'll have you on a future episode, my good friend. Lord.
I'm kind of like you, I just show up to make everything challenging. And I'll be back.
We look forward to it here on Starfleet Boys. So if you guys have made it this far on the YouTube, please be sure to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, if you'd like to, like this video if you'd like, and we'd love to hear from you. So we really enjoy comments, and I promise I try to read every one of them, if not answer them all. So good day to you. Live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time.
Live long and prosper, y'all.